And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balistrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Just wanted to go ahead and start things off by discussing all the latest updates from Patriots training camp. But before we do that, Steve, how are we doing today, man?
It's a hot one out there today, isn't it?
Yeah,
I don't
it
have
is.
to tell you that, but
No, we have two different types of heat in our kitchens here. The humid and wet on your side and the mega dry opening and oven on my side.
but it's great that training camp's here and they're in pads. And the first NFL preseason game is tonight, so I'm looking forward to watching a little bit of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having it back on, Steve. And it's, I know some people gripe about the preseason, but it's still just, to me, it's just another step. It's like you have mini camp, and then you have training camp, and then you have pads, and then you get into preseason. It's just a step up in the right direction, and I'm excited to see that progress.
Same here. I mean, it's actual football, and if you're a fan of the teams that are playing tonight, you've heard about your guys practicing against their teammates, but now you get to see your players going against another team's guys. Granted, it's very vanilla in the preseason, but it's a chance to see where they're at this point.
No, 100%, 100%. And again, I think there's just a wide variety of topics to discuss, Steve. I mean, we could go in a multitude of different directions. I don't know where you want to start, but I figured all we're going to do is just have kind of an open conversation about, just the latest updates and what's been going on at camp the last few days. And there's been some minor end roster moves. Ed Lee, Jalen Hurd, both are out. Jalen Hurd, I was actually excited when they made that signing because I just knew he hadn't been able to stay healthy and kind of latch on, but clearly he just feels like his body just won't be able to get to that pro level, which is too bad because he had a lot of talent. Although I think it was Andy Hart and Fitzy Stevens that were talking about how Baylor hasn't had the best track record of receivers coming out, making that jump to college, which can lead us into a Tyquan Thornton conversation at some point, because I think we're all kind of hoping and expecting a little bit more than what we've seen so far this summer. But, where do you want to go, Steve? I mean, we could talk about Mac Jones, Bill O'Brien, Jack Jones, Pop Douglas, everyone's fan favorite right now. What do you want to discuss?
Well, let's just start with the offense in general. I think as the days have been progressing, unlike a year ago, the offense is getting better and better and better each day. I mean, we're seeing the reports of this, and I think that's the Bill O'Brien factor. Is he runs a tight ship. He knows his stuff when it comes to running an offense, and I think the players are buying in, especially after a year ago, and that's why we're seeing them get better every day. We're hearing more big plays coming out of the offense. You mentioned Jalen Hurd, calling it quits after he got hurt. He made a great play the other day, caught a touchdown pass, but that's neither here nor there now. But I think, the offense in general is getting better and better. And that's not to take anything away from the defense, but I think that these two units are helping each other out. They're giving each other really strong looks, in the practices, and that will only benefit the team as they move forward.
No, I definitely agree. And there's, I mean, Hunter Henry's been lighting it up on offense, which is, very interesting. I wanted to bring up, speaking of the offense, I wanted to bring up Bill O'Brien's demeanor, and I think it's been noticeable, and I think it's calculated too. And I'll explain why. And I don't mean this in like a calculated deceit way. I mean it just as I'll explain my point first. Bill O'Brien in the past has been extremely fiery, right? Yeah. We've talked about, his, how he handles himself, condones himself on the field, the practice field, the sidelines. We've seen him get into it with Brady. We've seen him throw clipboards, scream at guys. He can certainly hold the best of them with a corkscrew tongue at times. But I think he's been really calm, cool, and collected. Mike Dussault from Patriots.com, I want to say it was him, and I don't want to speak for anybody else if I'm wrong, but said he was like professorial, is like kind of sitting there with just like a very calm demeanor, kind of just overlooking things. Now, I wonder if this is a little bit in part of Bill Belichick. And I don't mean this in a bad way at all. And I don't think it's a bad idea if this is the case. Or maybe if Bill O'Brien has just turned a new page and he's just at a different level. But I wonder if Bill Belichick told Bill, like, hey, no matter how bad things get on the field, let's try to make sure optically we're not like screaming and throwing things in there, because he knows how many eyeballs are going to be on the Patriots offense after such a debacle last year. And it's about kind of turning the page to this new season. I'm sure he might have said something along those lines to the players too, just like, hey, let's just go ahead and pretend like, last year, let's just kind of wash that away and move on, take a new step. I don't know, Steve, just a weird cockamamie theory that I kind of have. And again, I don't mean it in a deceitful way. I just think it's one of those things where they knew how bad last year was, and they're trying to limit any kind of distraction if that was to become one.
Yeah, I think you make a valid point there. I've read that as well, and I think you're right. I'm pretty sure it was Mike Dussault that said that, and I think O'Brien's been around long enough now. He's been in the league a long time. He's been coaching college football and the pros. I mean, for quite a long time now. I think he knows when to turn it on and when to tone it down, and I think he probably made a protracted effort here, I guess you could say. Hey, look, we're going to install this, and we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page before we ramp things up. And, I think after last year, the morale of the offense and the confidence was at a probably all-time low.
Yeah.
So I think he made not a protracted, a concerted effort, I should have said, to kind of tone things down. Let's get everybody on the same page, and then we'll worry about tiny mistakes and all this, but we're going to move forward. And I think that's part of it. I mean, he inherited an offense that was in complete disarray last year, and especially with his quarterback. So, I'm pretty encouraged by reading the reports every day from, all the people that we know and follow. And, they've been saying the offense is getting better and better every day. And I think that is a very positive sign, because we didn't hear that at all last year. And, for them to go into training camp and, the arrows pointing upward every day, I think that's a really good sign.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's not going to be one of those things where it's just an easy, turn the page thing, like we said, but it's going to take steps and progress, and hopefully they're able to do it. It seems like Mac Jones had a really, really good day on Tuesday. The offense in general, it seems like they're pushing the ball a little more down the field. And maybe I knew some people were kind of groaning and moaning that there's been a lot of checkdowns and the ball's not coming out fast enough. I'm sure the latter is not by design, but maybe they're starting with shorter stuff and then working their way into the intermediate and the more deep stuff. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just throwing out there hypothetically, as could be an option. Because I do think it's going to take wrinkles, and I'm sure the offense is going to look like we say every year, like we said with Tom Brady when he was here. The offense is going to look a lot better in week 8 than week 1. Barring of course injuries, but it is one of those things, Steve, that there's again a lot to discuss. I want to shift the conversation to the wide receiver group. Kendrick Bourne seems like he's getting a little bit more run, but he's been really quiet. It seems like Juju is going to be certainly heavily involved, and they think a lot about him in the mix. Do you want to go positive or negative here first? Because there's 2 receiver takes I want to talk about. So you tell me which one you want to start with.
Let's go positive first.
Positive first. Okay. So you got, obviously from a positive standpoint, you got DeMario Pop Douglas, who is, again, there's a big fan favorite. He has a lot of support going on right now, but consistently, and I would say by vast majority, I haven't really seen many negatives at him at all from anyone on any outlet whether it's been almost all local, but I would say it's been consistent where he has, more twitch and separation than a lot of the guys that are on the field, that he, is dominating one-on-ones, that he looks great in the slot, that he seems like he's on the right page, being at the right spot at the right time. Doesn't matter if it's, who he's facing. He blew away Marcus Jones earlier in practice today, that was reported in a one-on-one. And Marcus Jones, I know, is a second-year corner, but that's a guy who's been a heavily productive slot player going into his second year. And if this guy Douglas is able to continue this pace, Steve, I think he's going to make the team and maybe even get some significant reps.
Yeah, that's all we've heard since the beginning of OTAs. It seems like every day somebody is writing about Douglas making a big play. And I mean, again, it's training camp, whatever. We remember a few years ago in training camp, Zach Sudfeld couldn't drop a pass. You remember he had such a great camp, then he fell off the face of the earth. But I think this kid is going to make the team. And I do think, I've been beating the drum since Julian Edelman left that the Patriots need one of those small, quick, lightning fast, out of the break slot guys, because that's when their offense works the best. Now, I know Juju is going to get the lion's share of the reps, but if this kid continues to shine like this, I think he's going to be a good, big piece of the offense. So, again, I mean, you can only report from what you see. And every day this kid is doing it. So I think he's going to make the team unless, something drastic happens here in the next couple of weeks.
I totally agree. Even though he's small in stature, I just think that, like you said, the slot production has been incredibly important for the offense in New England for a long time. And, that's a position where you can normally get away with, being shorter as long as you have that quick twitch ability, which he does. And I think with Bill O'Brien's offense, given Juju's ability and some of the other guys they have, including the tight end group, including the running backs, it's a nice mix. I think that it would be so like them to have a big issue developing another high round receiver, and we'll get to that in a second. And then to find a good slot receiver in like the sixth round, because we've seen something very similar to that before. Now, with that being said, I do want to flip the page to Tyquan Thornton. So I'm not going to sit here. They haven't even had a preseason game yet. I'm not going to sit here and saying that he's going down, being a bust or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I will say that last year, early on at this time, when he was a rookie, he came out, he made a lot of plays early, and the speed was noticeable. Obviously, people talked about his frame being extremely thin. And then, he was hurt. We didn't really see him for a little while. Made a couple plays during the year, nothing too crazy, but you still worry about his ability to kind of hold up, because even though he has put on some muscle, according to him, I don't know if you saw the picture going around of him standing next to Juju Smith-Schuster at training camp the other day. It was like, wow, there's an NFL receiver and there's a not NFL receiver. And he's been, I think, on balance, relatively quiet, certainly pretty quiet, maybe even a little disappointed, depending on what your expectations are. And keep in mind, this was a player who was picked 50th overall in the draft 2 years ago. Now, again, we still have a lot of time, Steve, but are you concerned at all about what we've heard from or about Tyquan Thornton to this point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought by now, he would have been showing a lot more than he has so far. I don't know what the actual situation is, but it seems like he hasn't been getting the separation. And, whether that's him or just really good coverage from, the Patriots cornerbacks. But yeah, I think it's very concerning that he hasn't popped as much. I expected a lot more out of him.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, there's still time, plenty of time for us to see, him, all of a sudden he comes out at preseason or in the regular season and starts making some plays. And it would be huge if he could be that field stretcher, but he can't just do that. We can't just say, okay, Taekwon's coming out and it's the first game of the season and everyone knows like, hey, he's going to go deep every single time. Like by the middle of the season, we can't be like, oh, opposing defenses can't say, well, he's not going to run a shallow cross here or anything like that, because all he does is go routes or whatever. I do think that if they want to do a lot of short, intermediate passes, the defense, in order to really, really have that affect the defense, they have to respect guys on the outside that can stretch the field, because otherwise you're going to run into a situation last year, Steve, and it probably won't be as bad, but it could be an issue where all of a sudden you're going to have 10 of the 11 defensive players on the opposing team inside like the 6-7 yard line, 6-7 yards of the line of scrimmage. And that's where really his absence would be, and I mean, when I say absence, I mean just absent from getting significant reps. I just think if Taekwon really can't take that step, I'm not sure who they turn to get that, but they need to figure that out because it's a big missing piece.
I agree. I mean, again, I mean, we're still in the early. We've only been in camp for a little more than a week, so they haven't put a bunch of wrinkles in the offense yet. But I would expect, I could see O'Brien putting him in motion a lot this year to get him a free release where he could take advantage of his speed. But still, he has to be a bigger factor, I think, moving forward. Totally agree with that.
Right. Yeah. Anything else on offense, Steve, that we want to talk about here? We still don't have any veteran running back signings. As you and I discussed offline, on just a regular phone call, I want to say in the last 2 days. I don't think either one of us
expects in the last 2 days.
Yeah, right. Per usual. I don't think either one of us expect them to sign one of these veteran running backs, at least for the time being, just because, for one, the veteran running backs don't really need the training camp reps necessarily. For two, and I think more importantly, they want to keep getting a better look at these second-year guys. You and I both really like Kevin Harris and as like kind of a dark horse in this whole like RB2 situation. But, what are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. We've been talking about this. If they were to sign a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, he doesn't need to come into camp and get a ton of work as long as he's in shape. And that workout video where they showed him, preparing to sign somewhere, he looked in great shape. So, I think.
I mean, all they really need for someone like him, Steve, and I think he makes more sense than Dalvin, and just wanted to interject on this, is the fact that you just really need to have him spell Ramondre in a couple of series and maybe a little bit of goal line work, because he's been tremendously successful down in the red zone where they were 32nd in the NFL last year.
Yeah, and again, I mean, he scored 12 touchdowns last year. But at the same time, I think the Patriots' offensive line is going to be better. So, I'm glass half full here. So that I'm expecting, especially when they're in goal line, I think they're going to be a little more successful than they were a year ago. And I think that's important. But a guy like Elliott would definitely fit that bill. And I think you're absolutely right. They want to see where these second-year guys are. Kevin Harris, Pierre Strong, because I've been saying all along, I think Strong can fit that James White role. He's a change of pace back. He's not a big bruiser by any stretch of the imagination, like, Ramondre or Harris. But he can run between the tackles. He's got really good speed, and he gives you that third down look. And again, Ty Montgomery, a lot of people had him penciled in, and he's still out again. And I think that is a really telling situation. I mean, this guy has talent,
Can't
but he
do
can
it.
never stay on the field.
It's just, he's having a really hard time doing that, Steve. And, he can't make the team, from the tub, basically. And I just don't know if I mean, his last like really productive year was like 6 years ago. So it's something that we definitely need to keep an eye on. And if they don't think Pierre Strong can fill in that role, I think J.J. Taylor is what he is. He's a fringe roster guy, fill in for a game or two, but mainly a practice squad player. I don't know. Kevin Harris, I like the idea of him running. I don't know about him filling in that James White role. So do they need to bring in a veteran that does that?
Yeah, and that's why, you know, Elliott is actually a pretty good receiver. I mean, he's not a great receiver out of the backfield, but he's been pretty productive doing that. You know, and if he can spell Ramondre, you know, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it, 1-2, I think that will go a long way of keeping both of them healthy down the stretch. And, you know, you could use him out of the backfield if Strong isn't, you know, showing he's going to be ready for it.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. Any other factors from the offense? I want to say I know that rookie guard Antonio Mafe, I know some people have been saying he was struggling earlier on in camp. And now a lot of people have said that since the pads have come on, he's kind of been able to step up his game. I think that's really important because for that interior depth, and they found some good diamonds in the rough on that offensive line later in the draft, Steve. That would be important. Anything else on the offense that you want to discuss before we turn the page to defense?
Yeah, I think you could put this offense or defense, but I think Devontae Parker consistently going against you know, Gonzalez in the secondary and one-on-one drills. I think it's helping both of them because they say, you know, everything, you know, we've been reading is those two are having some really good battles every day, and it's only going to make both of them better. And, you know, one of the knocks on Gonzalez was he wasn't physical enough. Well, he's going against a pretty big physical dude every day in practice. And today I heard, you know, he flew up and made a tackle for a loss, you know, showing that physicality. So kudos to Devontae Parker.
Yeah, no, I mean, and look, a lot of times, you know, it should be said that Christian Gonzalez had a very big hit today and showed his physicality a little bit, which was probably one of the biggest knocks on him coming out of college, that he didn't have enough physicality to his game, and people were worried about the tackling ability a little bit. Those were the biggest knocks on maybe why the reason he fell to 17, although I think those are going to be dispelled here as time goes on. But, you know, for me, Steve, I don't worry about a receiver beating a defensive back in a one-on-one rep in training camp does not make me feel worse about the defensive back. I think that a lot of times receivers should win those battles. When you're talking about a guy like Devontae Parker that can use his body and is as a physical player that has a lot of NFL experience, it's a little bit different of a guy than Christian Gonzalez has gone up to in college. You know, it's a little more experienced. The physicality is tough. I think, like you said, iron sharpens iron a little bit there, and I think they're good positive reps for Christian Gonzalez. Any kind of highlight I've seen of Devontae Parker beating Gonzalez one-on-one, it looks, I don't want to say it looks like a push-up. Was that you playing this?
Well, a lot of times it is when those big wide receivers, you know, get those contested reps. A lot of times it is. The refs tend to let those guys get away with a lot. And the bigger the name, the more they get away with. We've seen that. Sure.
You know, I was pulling up. There was someone on defense I wanted to discuss. Isaiah Bolden. And I'll save that for later. But I was pulling up his bio because I wanted to read off a couple of things from people when we turn that to the second half of the show. And so we're talking about Christian Gonzalez, and in my headset I'm hearing, you know, with this pick in the draft, and all of a sudden I thought you were playing that. I thought you were playing Christian Gonzalez being selected over, because I was like, is this being played out loud? Because I hear it in my headphones right now. It very much screwed me up. But all right, as far as offense goes, we've got some building blocks. People, I don't want to panic too much. I think that they've shown some good and bad things. Again, I think the offense will build and build over time. I'm not really that worried about it. Let's quickly take a break, Steve. And when we get back, we will talk about the Patriots' latest from training camp and focus more on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, and we are back on Patriots 4th and 2 here with today is Derek Haven, Steve Balistrieri. Again, I just want to ask everyone to please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcast. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Steve and I are both brought to you by PatsFans.com. Be sure to check out all the great content there by Ian Logan, the gang. Shout out to Ian. It's good talking with him this week. And shout out to Russ Goldman, who's done a couple of shows that are also available from the Patriots 4th and 2 network that we're kind of throwing together here, headed by Russ himself. So wanted to give Russ a shout out as well. Steve, we spent a lot of time discussing the offense, and there's plenty of things that we can get into. But I think on the other side of the coin, defensively, there's a lot to discuss too. And I don't know where you want to start, but I'll let you take the floor first.
Okay, let's start with Keon White.
I love it.
Yeah, because, during OTAs and minicamp in the first couple of days of training camp with no pads on, it was hard to get any kind of reading of not only White, but any of those front seven guys, because, there's no contact, no pads. Well, now that the pads are on, White was making himself known to some of the offensive players this week. They said he was dominating at times on one-on-one drills. He was getting consistent pressure on the quarterback in 11s. They said a couple of them probably would have been sacks. That's such a good thing to hear.
Absolutely.
They drafted him in the second round.
And a lot of people are saying, and this is one of my favorite things to hear about a young defensive lineman, especially one who it seems like they believe can play more on the edges. I love hearing people say you can see his speed turn to power, and that's huge for edge players, speed to power. And if he's versatile and can line up in a bunch of different spots, he had multiple sacks today, or what would have been quote unquote sacks today from multiple different people who were in attendance from the media side. So I think, like your point, starting off with it's great to hear seeing some early flashes from him, especially given as they we talk about consistently building the young nucleus of this team, and on defense they have a lot of young guys. We talked about that ad nauseum last week. I hope Keon White can turn into one of those guys, and the returns are promising early.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so glad to see that today. And again, you made the term speed to power. That's so important for those guys on the edge, because a lot of guys have speed, but if they can't convert that to power, they get tied up, and sometimes they get washed out. But when you can do that, you can get an edge on that offensive lineman wherever you may line up, and that usually translates into hits or sacks. So that was great. I really loved hearing that.
All right, I'll go second. For me, it's Matthew Judon, and I'm not really worried about Matt Judon, Steve. I think that at the end of the day, things will be fine. I do think that him kind of being sidelined a lot, he's wearing his traditional red sleeves. Apparently, he's trying to cut down a little bit, so he just wants to sweat it out a little bit more. But for me, Steve, he's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things, except for being kind of involved in a lot of the team reps. And I think this is kind of the case of a traditional hold in. Do you think he's angling for, a contract adjustment? And do you think the Patriots should oblige?
Well, I think they should, and I think they will. I'm not taking that tack at all, because, we've seen it 2 years. He gets, in the middle of the season, he's having a tremendous year. And then he starts to tail off at the end. He gets worn down. And I think this year they're taking a proactive approach, and they know what he can do. They know what he's capable of. I think they just want to limit his reps so he's as fresh as can be when the season starts. And, hopefully that will translate into a really good final quarter of the season.
Yeah,
And
because
especially with, a couple of these younger guys. We talked about Keon White, Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, maybe even Ronnie Perkins, although we haven't heard much from him. Uh, that will keep him fresh too.
I agree. And if there's anything negative to be said about Matt Judon's time with the Patriots, it would be exactly what you said about how he's had some struggles down the stretch of the season, just kind of looking more fatigued, etc. I guess if you want to flip it to a positive side, you could say, well, if the younger guys are going to need more time to acclimate, like a Keon White, where they're kind of building up his role, building up his experience, if Matt Judon does follow that same trend of tailing off a little bit, maybe Keon White can ascend at the right time and they don't really miss a beat too much there. But, I mean, maybe it's a little wishful thinking, but I think we're all hoping that Judon is able to continue what he's done the last couple of years, which has been absolutely a home run of a free agency signing. Steve, I'll let you go next. What are you thinking?
Well, again, we've heard about the wide receivers struggling a little bit, but it's not just the wide receivers. The cornerbacks and safeties have something to do with that, and I think they're going to be very good this year. We hear about certain guys playing physical, breaking up passes, intercepting passes. I think that's a really good sign, not just a bad sign for the offense. I think they're showing that this secondary is going to be very, very good this year.
No, I agree. I agree, and I'm intrigued with a lot of different things from the secondary, and I do want to talk about a young player here in a minute. But I figure before I get to that, man, where do I want to go next? I mean, do you have another one in your back pocket before I talk about Isaiah Bolden?
Well, Joel Shapiro sent in a comment. And
I shared it when you were talking about how they need to pay Judon. And
okay.
I shared it on the screen.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Yeah, but I agree with you, Joel. He does need to.
He is a leader.
He is, absolutely. And this is just kind of tied into what we're talking about, Joel's comment, a couple other things. I know Matthew Judon is not a homegrown player, and we can kind of talk about both of these things because they are linked together, Steve. But rewarding a player like Matt Judon that's come in and done everything right, that is a proven leader, that's had incredible production. People know how good he is as a player. To go ahead and give him a bump, I would think it would be important for the team, just a good message to send to the rest of the team being like, hey, if you're committed and you do these things and you perform, we will reward you for that. And I would say in the similar vein, it's the same discussion that we have a lot of times about, we had this discussion about last week about Mike Onwenu, Kyle Duggar. There's another one that I'm blanking on. Hunter Henry, we'll see where he lands. A lot of these guys that are in the last years of their contracts,
Uche.
If you could, Josh Uche, if I'll be curious to know, how they handle certain things like that. Now, if Josh Uche goes and gets an absolute bag, but they were to pay Kyle Duggar and Mike Onwenu, well, you're not going to re-sign everyone. At some point you're going to be outbid, but I think it would be really, really bad if they were to let a bunch of these homegrown players go that have all really performed, developed, and now we're getting paid elsewhere. I just think that sends a really bad message, Steve.
Yeah, and I think they know, they know what they have in Judon, and he's that kind of outspoken guy, but in a positive way.
Yep.
That it's good for the team because, like, the other day, you and I were laughing about it. He was talking about his contract. And, when somebody asked him about it, he was like, oh, no, you're all snitches. And I'm not sharing anything with you. And Devin McCourty said, oh, you can trust me. And he's like, no, you're the biggest snitch of them all. And it cracked everybody up, and that's his way of playing Bill Belichick type of ball, but in a different manner and making everyone chuckle over it. So
he is a ball buster. Reminds me a little bit of Mike Vrabel in that way too.
Yeah,
he just
different, in a different way, but
different way. Yeah, but just so sometimes he says some things, and I'm just like, Vrabel was more of an agitator, than Judon.
Vrabel could make Belichick laugh.
Oh yeah,
and I think Judon is kind of like the same way.
Yep, I agree.
So,
Anyone else you want to bring up, Steve?
Jonathan Jones. I mean, Jones is balling out as we totally expected. I mean, that's not a surprise. Um, you know, right now he's playing on the perimeter, but we know he can step into the slot if they need him to do that. So, I think he's like another one of these veterans that Belichick likes and trusts. And thank you, Chris. Greetings to you as well. But I think Jonathan Jones is having a really good camp. He's picked off a couple of passes. So
Yeah, no, he has. And I think that it's important too, if they can have someone like him who's better inside than outside, but if he can be a versatile piece, Steve, as he has been in the past, to to play inside, play outside, maybe bring Marcus Jones in here. But I still want Marcus Jones to be kind of the jack of all trades guy. The real question with Marcus Jones is, does he want to be that guy, or does he want to just focus on cornerback? I mean, who's going to be? We know Christian Gonzalez is going to be playing one boundary corner position. We know John Jones is probably going to be in the slot. So is it going to be Jack Jones on the opposite side of Christian Gonzalez, depending on his legal situation? Is it going to be Jalen Mills? And is it going to be a player like Isaiah Bolden, who we'll talk about here in just a minute? But I mean, which would be a really, really big story that would come on kind of out of nowhere, and I don't really expect that to happen, but we'll talk about it shortly. I think that the growth from John Jones and his ability to play and shadow extremely fast guys, like if they're going to face Tyreek Hill or somebody, or Jalen Waddle or whoever it may be, Devonta Smith, his ability to play inside and outside and follow guys with that speed that he has, I think is incredibly valuable for the team in that secondary.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, he's one of those Belichick guys that nobody thought much of when he got here, and he's worked himself into a really nice role, and he's getting compensated quite well. So
certainly,
I think he's going to be even better this year.
Certainly. And, so again, I keep talking about Isaiah Bolden. So, the Patriots, for one, the Patriots picked him in the 7th round at pick 245 at the very end. Came out from Jackson State, but he's 6'2", 203. And we talked about him and what's his first name? Last name is Speed, Steve. Why am I blanking?
Yeah, Amir Speed.
Amir Speed. Both very similar. Like I said, 6'2", 203 for Isaiah Bolden, ran a 4.3 540. So, height, weight, speed, check all those boxes. But there's also a reason those guys are there. Well, with Jack Jones, who kind of had an incident today at practice, which we can always discuss, all of a sudden Isaiah Bolden gets some reps on the outside. Now, this could be just one of those things where Bill and the defensive coaches are just saying like, hey, let's just throw him out there and see how he handles, those situations against higher end talent versus the lower end receivers on the roster. Isaiah Bolden took some prominent reps on the outside, opposite of Christian Gonzalez, and apparently held up pretty well. And I'm not expecting Isaiah Bolden to come out of nowhere and start for this team, but they have had a lot of luck, Steve, finding some diamonds in the rough, and cornerback's one of those positions, and it would be a great news for the team if they could do that again here, with another late round draft pick defensive back.
Yeah, for all the Bill can't draft people, when it comes to the late rounds or undrafted people, he's had really good luck finding cornerbacks that are either late round guys or undrafted. And, this kid's got the intriguing size and speed. I think at a minimum this year, he'll probably find himself on the practice squad.
Yep.
We'll see how it goes. But barring injury, he probably won't get a ton of reps because of, who's in front of him. But you never can tell a situation like today where Jack Jones left practice early.
Well, for one, they're only going to keep so many cornerbacks, Steve, and we know that Christian Gonzalez and John Jones and Marcus Jones are and I guess I'll put Jalen Mills with the corners. I think all four of those guys are locks. Miles Bryant is a question mark. Jack Jones is a question mark, and Isaiah Bolden is a question mark. And all those guys for kind of different reasons. I'd say for Bolden, he's a 7th-round player who, if he's going to make the roster, Steve, he's going to have to do something on special teams. Now, he was an All-American kick returner in the fall of 2021, so he has played special teams before, and I do think that his frame is something intriguing to work with, and I think that there's something to be said about worrying that he's going to latch on somewhere else. Jack Jones obviously is a question mark given the legal situation. And I think that his outburst, or whatever you want to call it today, which we'll talk about after this, I think the reason they had him sidelined is because probably for a couple of reasons. They're realizing they need to get this guy kind of settled down and another optics kind of thing. Just my take, but we'll get to that. And Miles Bryant is a question mark because I think the kid works hard. I just don't think he can really play at the level. I think he's just too small. And they also have classified him a lot as a safety, Steve. So where do they factor that in? How many defensive backs in general do they hold? I think that could be, part of this whole thing. And if Jack Jones can't play this season for whatever reason, I think that there's a chance Isaiah Bolden could sneak onto that roster. But if he's there, I do think it makes it really harder, and you have some hard decisions to make. And, if you're the Patriots front office.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of fans are really down on Miles Bryant. I have been a lot in the past, but we know Belichick likes him because he's versatile. He can play safety, slot corner. He's better when they switch to zone than in a man-to-man situation, as we've all seen. So, I'm not going to erase him off the 53-man roster just yet.
No, I'm not either, because there's clearly a lot, as much as he has had some pretty bad moments, to put it lightly, there's a reason that Bill keeps him around, and his versatility, I do think, is valuable. I do think that, this might be one of those years for him where if he does make the team, he's got to have to show some significant improvement during the season in order to keep it going here. But it's also one of those things where I wouldn't necessarily say that. Now, what do you think about the Jack Jones thing, Steve? So why don't you tell me what happened with Jack Jones today at practice, like you said before the show?
Yeah. Apparently there was a very contested catch situation with him and Kendrick Bourne. And from what I read, I think it was Evan that wrote this, Evan Lazar from Patriots.com. I think it was him. I hope I'm not, naming the wrong person, but whatever. There was a contested catch situation, and the Patriots had the corners playing with those thick gloves that you see, almost like mitts. A lot of like soccer goalie gloves, I guess, would be one way of putting it. Yep. But apparently, Jack Jones, after the fact, there was a lot of jarring going on, and he threw his gloves down. And shortly after that, he left the field. So it would seem to be that he was kicked out of practice. We don't know. I mean, he might have actually even been injured. We don't know. But that's right. What I read.
Yeah, and so what I had read, which I know we both didn't see some of what we're saying, but basically piecing it together is that, he was, pretty animated afterwards. Then he was sent away for 2 practice periods, and then him and Matt Groh, he returned, and Matt Groh and him were on the sidelines having a long conversation. I don't know. Like I said, it could be something, it could be nothing. I think it's worth noting because I know he's showed, it wasn't all great. I mean, there were ups and downs, like it's going to be for any rookie, especially at that position, which is one of the hardest in the entire league. I'd probably argue the second hardest position in the league to play. But with everything he has going on right now, you just want to hope that he can kind of keep everything in line, because there is talent there, and you don't want to see him kind of wasted away. Not that this is saying he will. I just think it's worth noting, Steve. Certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, you never want to see a guy, get pulled off the practice field. So
No. Yeah, no. And there haven't really been the fighting has been quiet so far, which means it'll probably come soon. The dog days here will approach before
yeah,
before
because
they know it.
after the first week, that's when guys are going to get a little tired, a little hot, a little heated under the collar, and you know we'll see more of that. Not that there'll be fights per se, but there'll be some pushing and shoving and jarring at each other for
Oh, I
sure.
agree. I definitely agree. Steve, okay, here we go. Any final thoughts on the defense or final thoughts on the show if you have nothing left on the defense?
Well, overall, I really think that they've had a productive training camp so far. There hasn't been the hiccups that we saw last year. We hear very few guys running laps this year
Mm-hmm.
for pre-snap penalties and whatnot. They've had a couple, but it wasn't anything like we were seeing last year, and I think that's a positive sign. I think the guys are pulling together. I think the coaching staff is on the right track. The one thing I would be concerned about, and it seems like it happens every summer, is injuries. There seems to be like there was a bunch of injuries at the beginning, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the turf down there. I don't know, but every summer it seems like the Patriots have a rash of injuries in training camp.
Well, I think all NFL teams, Steve, are balancing out how to approach training camp, and it's a lot different than it used to be. You know, obviously, when you're talking 20, 30 or longer years ago, you're talking about 2-a-days, and those are long gone. And then now you have to have 3 training camp practices before you can even put pads on. And there's only so much time they can do X, Y, or Z. And I think what we've seen is a lot of soft tissue injuries early, which isn't really that surprising because when guys work out in the offseason, they're staying in shape, they're staying strong, or a lot of them are, 99% of them are. But it's different than necessarily the quick twitch muscles and things like that you're going to use doing football moves. And yeah, they have guys that are getting together and throwing together, working out together, but it's not always the same. And I think, there's a reason that if the Patriots play on a Sunday, they even if they have a quote unquote victory Monday, they're required to and want to lift on Monday. They want to lift the day after a game. It's the following day where they rest because all the studies have shown, and there's a lot of the NFL teams are like this. A lot of the studies have shown that lifting weights right after a game, the following day, it kind of helps your body kind of ramp down from everything it went through the day before. Now, to your point about the injuries, it does seem like it is the turf thing. I'm certainly not a big fan of. I just think we've seen it over time with pro sports where I'm not so sure. Now they're still on real grass though behind the stadium, Steve, correct?
No, I think that's turf.
Is it turf?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's turf there, I mean, I know a lot of players get worried about that. I mean, it's tough, and that can get hot. It gets hard. I mean, obviously, I know the real grass is easier or real grass is better for the players. Turf is obviously easier to maintain, but I think from an injury standpoint, I think a lot of the players would much rather play on real grass than artificial turf. As we wrap up the show today, I just want to thank everyone for listening to our podcast here, Patriots 4th and 2. Again, please, please, please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. We will be back next week, God willing, to keep discussing the Patriots, to talk about the Patriots training camp and the preseason game. We'll be looking forward to that, which will be exciting. And we'll have a lot more to talk about. Obviously, for that next week. But until then, we will see you guys then. Thanks for joining us and have a good rest of your day.